Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric here with Iraq Veteran 8888. Today I've got another Gun Gripe episode for you, and I've got a special guest today. This is Tim, Military Arms Channel, and all of his jolly green giant glory here. So we're going to be talking today. Today's Gun Gripe is reasonable restrictions, and I know that term gets thrown around a lot. It's one of those weird things that we always hear getting thrown around by the anti-gunners and
the pro-gunners.
And the pro-gunners.
Yeah.
And that's a scary thing, but let's talk a little bit about that. So, I mean, why is that such a random thing to say? When we talk reasonable restrictions, I mean, define reasonable, right?
So that's just it. It's kind of a nebulous term that's been thrown around so much. And we even had a Supreme Court case, Heller versus DC, where it was a landmark decision that had both good and bad implications. All right. So one of the positive things about that case was the fact that it was decided that the Second Amendment does in fact protect an individual right. No longer was this collective right argument valid.
All right. So that's a
win.
that.
It's a win. Boom. But then Scalia went and wrote the opinion that the Second Amendment and rights in general are subject to reasonable restrictions. What lawyer would use such terminology that was so nebulous, that's boundless, literally quite boundless? Who would use that type of terminology? And like you said, we hear the anti-gunners saying, we just want reasonable restrictions. That's all we want. We don't want to take all your guns. We just want reasonable restrictions. It's a complete lie because they've been caught. We have the March for Your Lives, that chick in D.C., the blonde-haired girl
for gun safety, and then the
but
demand action.
I'm just talking about the recent march, the March for Your Lives thing. They had the blonde girl, I forget her name, but she said it quite boldly right there in the National Mall. We want. It's nice you gave us
and we will take that.
It was nice that you gave us the bump stocks. It's nice that those got taken away, but you give us an inch and we're taking a mile. We want them all. She said it, but before that, 1994, Dianne Feinstein said the exact same thing. If I had 51 votes in the Senate, Mr. and Mrs. America, I'd round them all up. Well, she's changed her tune because all she wants now is reasonable restrictions.
Yeah.
I don't really want to come for your gun. See, the poor teenage girl in D.C. hadn't been read in yet. She hadn't been taught yet. You can't really be honest with the gun owners. You can't tell them that you want them all. You lie to them, and you just say you just want reasonable restrictions.
Right.
Right? And so then we can just nip and pick away a little bit at a time until we finally win our battle here, which is ultimately complete disarmament.
Who gets to choose what is reasonable and what isn't? So if you ask somebody on the anti-gun crowd, what's reasonable? Well, reasonable is we run them all through wood chipper until they're all gone. All right, that's reasonable. They no longer exist, right? That's reasonable. But a guy like us, I mean, we're absolutely zero compromise. I mean, I'm a zero compromise kind of guy when it comes to my rights because they're my dang rights. I'm not going to tell somebody, your First Amendment, your freedom of speech, I think we need reasonable restrictions on what you say.
There are people that will argue that.
That's offensive. You shouldn't say that, or you shouldn't think that way. That's scary thinking. You shouldn't be, having that type of opinion on a certain matter. We are the only group of people that get dragged through the mud when it comes to this type of thing. The Second Amendment community is constantly dragged through the mud. We're constantly made out to look like monsters, and the bad thing about it is that the 2A community, all right, we are the last group of people that would ever try to deprive anybody of their rights. If anything, our efforts are try to empower other people to protect their families, protect their rights, protect their neighborhoods and their their friends and family and everybody, and just to be ambassadors to their rights and explaining the importance of exercising your rights. And if anything, the 2A community empowers all people who are willing to listen to the way that we, put these kind of things out. We would never try to stifle anyone's freedom of speech. And we're the only group of people that gets treated that way. You look at all the crap that's been going on social media. Zuckerberg's in trouble with Facebook because the government realizes, well, dang, this is a social media megalodon that has this infinite voice that we can't control. Even the government realizes they can't control it.
I don't think anything's going to happen there.
Well, it may or may not, but that doesn't change the perception that when people look at YouTube, when they look at Facebook, they look at all these entities where they obviously have some form of political agenda or some form of leaning political arena that they kind of lean towards a certain area. Well, then, after a while, you're going to be like, well, dang, they're really treating the conservative folks like crap. we would never turn around and try to take anything away from what anybody else is doing. But yet, here we are where, oh, well, you need to be reasonably restricted. So really, what's reasonable?
Well,
I think you are unreasonable. You are unreasonable. Is the problem.
Right now, there's a discussion whether it's reasonable to kick us off YouTube. They don't like what we have to say, so they just want to kick us off. But yes, it's a private entity, and we can get into the arguments. I know we're going to see that in the comment section below. Well, it's private property and all this other stuff, but there's an argument to be made that they're monopolies. There isn't a competitor to YouTube or Facebook, and that they have become the new public square of freedom of speech. It could be argued both ways. I'm not making the point here.
Yeah, I mean, that's
back
not
to
really
what's,
what, yeah.
But back to what's reasonable, you know, it's horrible because we see the anti-gunners using this, and it's bled over into the pro-2A community, where when we saw the whole bump stock thing after Vegas, the narrative was, and it's driven, again, NRA is right there saying that we think that anything that, you know, simulates the fire of a machine gun, I'm paraphrasing, but it's still on their website, you know, should be restricted. And then we had, you know, gun-owning Americans, supposedly hardcore pro-2A advocates saying, well, it's reasonable we give up bump stocks.
That reasonable term
It's
getting
reasonable.
thrown around is a very, very bad deal.
Right.
You
There's
know,
nothing reasonable
The word
about
reasonable when it comes to restricting someone's rights is the same type of, it's the same wording as assault rifle, gun violence. You know, they attach this action to an inanimate object, and by default, they attach this need to restrict you, but they use the word reasonable. So, I mean, so if I misbehave and I'm a kid, right, and I'm acting up and my granny wants to spank me or something, right? Well, it's a reasonable spanking. Don't worry. I'm going to use a switch that's not super big. I'm going to break a branch off that's not really that big. It's a reasonably sized branch. I mean, the end harm, the end, you know, travesty that occurs to us is the same thing. Right. It's just wrapped up in this pretty little word that make it sound like it's not bad, but it really is.
But here,
you know?
it's this incremental death by 1,000 paper cuts analogy, which is used quite a bit.
Yes.
So when you start using terms like reasonable restrictions, then and especially when you have the Second Amendment community, what do we have here?
Oh, what's this?
Parkland student. Oh yeah. So this goes back to the teenager that was talking about calls for the confiscation of all semi-automatic firearms. So again, she'll be read in, and she'll be told you can't say that.
By the way,
yeah, that's recent news. She's going to be read in by, you know, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, and Dianne Feinstein, and said, look, you can't really be honest with the gun owners. You got to lie to them. You got to say you just want reasonable restrictions. But getting back to my initial thought, you know, it's bled over into the pro-2A community where they're saying, yeah, you know, it's reasonable. So, you know, what if one gun owner thinks, well, you know what, it's reasonable we don't have 60-round drums. We should just stick with 30-round magazines. But somebody else says, well, why 30? You know, let's set it at 10. That seems reasonable. You don't need more than 10 rounds. Joaquin Jackson, board member of the NRA for years. You don't need more than 5 rounds if you're going to hunt. If you're a real man, you don't need more than 5 rounds in your gun.
Is that how he talks?
Well, yeah, that's my best. Google him. Google Joaquin Jackson television interview, and you'll see his words. And he was advocating for basically you don't need more than 5 rounds.
Don't no kind of real man need but 2 shots in his gun.
You just need a musket, son, or you're a woman.
Yeah,
you know, but that's a reasonable restriction in his mind. There is nothing reasonable about it. And when you start talking about reasonable, we in the Second Amendment community have to understand that the anti-gunners are playing a long game. Okay, their concept of reasonable restrictions is a strategy. And that is we're just going to take bits and pieces of your rights, and so in 100 years you have nothing left. And when we in the Second Amendment community buy into that nonsense and go, oh, it's reasonable to take bump stocks, it's reasonable to take away machine guns, it's reasonable to have limits on barrel length, it's reasonable to have, and it's not reasonable, but we keep giving them those little bits and pieces, we're going to wake up in 50 or 100 years. I mean, it could be 20 years, and we have nothing left because we gave everything away because it was reasonable.
The little mouse in the middle of the night is going to come by and take a little bitty piece of cake each night. And when one day you're going to wake up, all the cake's going to be gone.
Yep, and each bite is a reasonable restriction.
Like, who took my cake?
Right?
Well.
And that's what we have to avoid. And as a community, we have to start to control the narrative. We can't let the anti-gunners control the narrative. We can't let them sell to us that there is such a concept as a reasonable restriction on a basic human right. And we can't let them drive the narrative of gun violence. this gun is incapable of violence. This gun will do nothing. This gun is incapable of doing anything until I touch it or somebody else touches it. But yet you have people in the Second Amendment community that talk about gun violence,
well,
and how we deal with gun violence. There's no such thing. There is violence where firearms are used, but you take a look at a complete gun ban in London. They even want to restrict kitchen utensils, yet London just passed Chicago in violence.
Well,
violent crime. This year, London has a higher violent crime rate than Chicago, Illinois, which we jokingly call Chirac, because I live right next to it. You go there at any time on a warm summer night and roll down the windows, and you'll hear gangs shooting it out. You hear gunfire. I mean, anyway.
It's funny that you mentioned, driving the narrative or controlling the narrative. And the funny thing about the 2A side of the situation, the folks in the 2A community, is like, look, I think controlling the narrative might even be like a strong bit of language in that case. I think, honestly, all we really want is just to open a fair playing field. We're not saying that the anti-gunners can't think the way they want to think or say what they want to say. All we want is for a fair chance to kindly refute your opinion with our own. I mean, it's okay for everybody to have varying opinions, but I think that when you look at the entire situation for the reality that it is, and you look at it with a bit of logic, eventually most people find that we are indeed right.
You can't
and
have
I think winning
no
over
compromise.
those people,
Right.
There is no compromise though.
You have to realize that you can't compromise, and that's the problem. Is that we have so many gun owners that are so willing to compromise and to belong to organizations that do nothing but compromise, and then they get mad at us because we say you got to stop because we're not going to have anything left if you don't quit. And what we need to do is start driving the narrative. It's not a problem of gun ownership. There's more Americans now than 100 years ago with guns. There's more Americans, there's more guns in the hands of Americans, yet violent crime is down. But we have a 24-hour news cycle, and we're tied to cell phones. We have constant information flowing our way. So we have this 24-hour news cycle that when something does happen bad with a firearm, it's pumped out over the news wires, and everybody's talking about it for days and days on end, and you're convinced that you're in imminent danger of walking outside in an AR-15, nobody required to pull the trigger, just AR-15 by itself. Gun violence is going to gun you down in your driveway. When the reality is you're more likely to win the lottery twice than you are to die by an AR-15. You can't, and we have to get the gun owners to understand that and stop buying into this narrative and stop using the narrative of the anti-gunners of things like reasonable restrictions or gun violence.
Yeah.
We need
or
to get everybody
assault weapons. That's the dumbest thing ever.
We got to get on the same page, guys, and we have to understand that there is no such thing as a reasonable restriction, and you got to be no compromise. We've given enough. We need more back.
I agree.
So
there's also a separate part of this whole thing that I think really goes far into the whole concept of being complacent. I think that a lot of gun owners, they don't necessarily mean bad. They don't mean a negative thing when they're thinking about things that are going on in the 2A community. I think a big part of it is they just simply get complacent. Oh, well, we got a Republican-controlled, Congress, and all forms of government, Republican-controlled, Republican president, everything like that. And you look at that and they go, oh, well, nothing will ever happen to us. We'll never lose a right under a Republican-controlled this and that. Oh, well, only Democrats would do that. If we had a Democrat-controlled majority in the House, Senate, presidency, all forms there. And, what was that to say that they would pass all the anti-gun legislation they could? Very well so, maybe. But, okay, so if the Republicans, and looking at it from this just two-sided situation, you're either over there or you're over here, and here's the fence. If the Republicans are as awesome as everybody says they are, then why, if the Democrats are the evil anti-gun, gunning for your rights people that we say they are, then why are the Republicans not passing every pro-gun piece of legislation that's coming across their desk? Why are we not picking from pro-gun bills like ordering off Taco Bell menu?
Right, and that's
why is that not happening? So if they are if the Democrats are the evil side that we're trying to point the finger at, then why aren't the Republicans the knights in shining armor?
They're not. Because they're both one and the same, and they're both doing the same thing, and we got to stop this divisiveness of Democrat versus Republican. It's a much bigger argument than that, and this crosses, those boundaries. I don't consider myself a Republican or a Democrat. I'm a libertarian, and we need to stop the politics of all that, because the Republicans have done more damage to our Second Amendment rights in my lifetime than the Democrats have. The worst thing the Democrats did was under Bill Clinton, and it expired after 10 years. But we went through 8 years of Obama, and we had national tragedies during his administration, yet somehow we emerged without a new assault weapons ban, without anything happening because gun owners were active. And we had this conversation in the car. Here's the sad reality. Right now, gun owners are complacent. They think, oh, well, the Republicans are going to save us. When in reality, a Republican gave us Gun Control Act, gave us a lot of the gun control acts. We had Reagan, who gave us the 1986 machine gun ban. We had Bush 41. They gave us an 89 import ban.
FOPA was backed by the NRA.
And the poison pill, they told Reagan to sign it. They would fight it in court. They never lifted a finger to do so.
The NRA's been responsible for a lot of this stuff.
So you got to stop with the thinking that, you know, it's Republican versus Democrat. It's not. We need to take control of the narrative, and we need to dig in our heels and become no compromise and propose solutions. Okay? Here's the problem. Everybody wants to blame the gun for the violence, right? Well, no. There's violence, and there's violence where guns are included, but there's much more violence where guns aren't being used. A lot of people out there seem to think that they're in imminent danger of being gunned down by somebody wielding an AR-15, when the reality is, and you can look this up, it's on the FBI's website. Every year there's less than 400 murders with a rifle of any type. Nationwide, less than 400 people are killed by a rifle of any type. And of those less than 400, 3 to 5% of those may be of the AR-15 type. That means you're more likely to be struck by lightning.
I mean, how many
shot by somebody wielding an
Americans...
AR-15, but we're convinced. So we got to stop and we got to take control of the narrative and say, look, it's not a gun problem. Yeah. It's a violence problem. It's a social economic issue. There's problems within this country that's causing the violence, the drug trade that brings the violence with it. And until we address those issues that are really at the root of all the violence that America does deal with, and usually in our major cities, then we're never going to get past stupid.
I mean,
and it's like, well, let's just take the gun away. Well, why are they still killing each other? Let's take knives away. Well, they're still killing each other. That's what's happening in London.
Right.
They keep taking stuff away. Now London surpasses Chicago in violent crime. But they've taken everything away.
Well,
how is this possible?
They also use this data to manipulate it in a way that drives their narrative. So more Americans are killed each year from heart disease and texting and driving and car accidents and drunk driving and suicides and all these random other causes that Americans die from. And you don't see everybody trying to go, oh, well, we need to ban cell phones because people text and drive and die. Or, oh, well, we have to, ban all of these pharmaceuticals and all these nasty crap that everybody's putting in their bodies because it's obviously killing people. Oh, no, we can't do any of that. We have to look at this tiny little microcosm of death, that is not even representative of how most Americans die every year anyway. It's an irrelevant data point.
But here's a double standard there too. So where guns are always blamed for violence, so when Cecil the Lion was shot, who do we blame? Do we even know what type of rifle the dentist used? We don't, because they blamed the dentist. They blamed him for shooting Cecil the Lion, right? If I get into a car, a Corvette that's easily capable of exceeding every posted speed limit in the United States, and I go buy a bottle of Jack Daniels, and I go flying down the road at 140 miles an hour, and I hit a minivan and kill an entire family, who do you blame or what do you blame? Do we blame Chevy or the Corvette because they made the car that could go so fast? Do we blame Jack Daniels because they made the alcohol that you consumed that allowed you to be drunk driving?
Do we say you can't have cars anymore because one person went out and did something stupid in a car?
No, we blame the driver, right?
Exactly.
But when somebody uses a gun to commit an act of violence, it's the gun's fault. We need to take guns away. But when somebody kills, more people die, more teenagers, more children. If it's truly about saving the children, then do something about the drug problem in the United States, because that kills far more children than anything else does. Yeah. I mean, more children, if you want to talk about AR-15s in particular, more children die in swimming pools.
Yeah.
That more children die falling downstairs.
Or if they're really concerned about what's
killing
kids, they might be concerned a little bit more about Planned Parenthood and all that too.
I don't want to get into that because I've had that discussion, and people get really, that's another hot button issue.
It is.
I don't want to get into that. But
it is, but if you want to call the kettle black, you want to call it like you see it, I mean, it kind of is what it is. So it's a slippery slope. Ooh, that's another term.
Slippery slope.
Ooh, yeah, give them that slippery slope, that inch, and they'll take the mile. But yeah, there are a lot of double standards with the whole thing, and it is weird. Reasonable restrictions, reasonable. What's reasonable? So the thing that I'll leave you with, this thought, would be to think about it like this. I mean, who do you want deciding that? Who's going to make that decision? If the person, you look to your left and look to your right, the people around you, you have an ability to change their hearts and their minds by your actions. You are an ambassador of the Second Amendment community. You can teach the people around you that we're not crazy, that we're just average people that just happen to own guns, and we use them for a wide variety of different purposes. And by controlling information you put out to people and changing people's views around you, that is how you are going to define, well, as dumb as it is to even define what's reasonable, because you can't define what's reasonable. But what you can do is you can change people's opinions about how they think about people like us. And you're going to do that through your actions, through living the Second Amendment as a lifestyle and promoting it in a positive way to young people, old people, everybody all around you, making sure that they understand that is a no compromise position on the Second Amendment, and folks will eventually get it. It might take a while.
Not just be an outspoken advocate of the Second Amendment, but just liberty in general.
Yeah.
The reason we have a Second Amendment, ladies and gentlemen, is because that is the final check and balance of government. When our founding fathers wrote the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, they put the ultimate power of government in the hands of the people, and that's where it belongs. We rule. We are ruled by the consent of the people. Our government rules by the consent of the people, is what I'm trying to say.
We're supposed to.
And that's why we have a Second Amendment. So we're not subjects to a crown. We are the ultimate power of government. And if you take our Second Amendment away, now the government's unbridled and it can do whatever it wants, and we can't stop them. So there's an important part of all this, and the Second Amendment is one part, but in the bigger picture, it's liberty as a whole that we're protecting, guys. If the Second Amendment falls, then that door is wide open for the First, the Fourth, the Fifth, all of them to fall. And so we have to defend all liberty and change the narrative and control the narrative and start to control that as best as we can, despite the fact that they're trying to silence us as best they can.
I will say this. I will say that if you're anti-gunner and you're watching this video, and if you've gotten this far, then you probably at least have listened to what we've said and taken into account a bit. But one thing I'll say, if you're an anti and you're watching this video, I can definitely say that the fight that we are fighting for our rights for Second Amendment are just as important to you, even though you're anti-gun, than you may even think. Because if I make a video talking about something like, whatever, I'm trying to teach people about guns, or I'm trying to, talk about things that are going on from an advocacy standpoint, it does affect you whether you wish to recognize it or not. You're still responsible for protecting your family and being a responsible citizen and everything like that. So I think even the antis should understand that the average gun owner in this country is pulling for you a lot more than you might think. And yes, you may disagree, but I think with a little bit of time, you may even eventually realize that we're right. And I just hope that it's not too late. Right. I mean, we don't hate you guys if you don't agree with us. We certainly don't hate you. We just want you to see the reality for what it is. We want you to see the light and come to it and use your rights, exercise your rights. I mean, I just hope that, those pleas often fall on deaf ears. I mean, the antis, oh, well, that's just bull crap and it's a bunch of hokey pokey, it doesn't not right or whatever. But I hope that if you're anti and you're watching this video, that maybe your mind will open to a degree and you'll understand where we're coming from, and that we ultimately want everyone to be able to exercise their rights.
There's a bigger picture there.
There is a bigger picture,
and you have to understand
you're a part of it. You
right.
just need to understand that you are. You just don't realize you are.
If you truly believe in liberty and freedom, you have to embrace the Second Amendment. And if you don't, you can't selectively choose rights.
Good point.
It's all or nothing. And so if you say, well, you know what? I think it's reasonable that I should be able to stick a knife in Eric's throat right now. That seems reasonable. It's not reasonable.
That wouldn't be fun.
It wouldn't be fun, but it's not reasonable either. And so there's no such thing in my mind as a reasonable restriction on a protected right. First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, there's no such thing as a reasonable restriction. And that, again, is the whole point of this video. And if you're an anti-gunner, and again, you've made it this far, congratulations. You probably have punched your monitor 3 or 4 times and broken your keyboard. But the reality of the matter is, folks, we have liberty, what's left of it. We have it because we have a Second Amendment, and the ultimate power of government rests in the hands of the people, and that power is given to us by the Second Amendment. If they go too far, it's our responsibility to throw off the chains of tyranny, and that's why the Second Amendment was written. It's not about hunting, and it's not about anything else. It's not about going out and doing 3-gun matches. It's about self-defense and making sure a tyrannical government doesn't take over, which is the direction we're headed. Anyway,
You nailed it right on the head there, Tim. Guys, thanks for watching today's video. I know we kind of jumped around to a lot of different things, but anytime Tim and I, get into a chat, it's always going to go down different rabbit holes there. But we hope you enjoyed today's Gun Gripe. It's always a pleasure having you on the show, Tim.
Thanks, man.
We really enjoy Gun Gripes. It's a fun way to just kind of vent, because there are frustrating things that go on, and it's great to be able to just kind of vent your. I hate to use the word frustration, but sort of vent what you have on your mind, so that like-minded people, and then maybe some unlike-minded people, may have their hearts and minds changed a little bit. And I think that's how all this is going to be handled moving forward. Is folks just have to understand where we're coming from, and as long as we have a platform to do it, and as long as they don't want to try to deprive us of our First Amendment rights too.
Right.
I know they're already going after the Second, but as long as we have an open microphone, so to speak, we'll always be here with these videos to let you guys know kind of where we stand on things. So guys, thanks for watching today's video. All of our viewers that support us on outlets like Patreon, or purchasing man cans or shirts over on Force from Freedom, thank you guys very much for the support. Tim is also on Patreon. So if you guys,
thank you for the support.
Yeah,
yep.
If you guys decide to donate $1 or $2 on Patreon, guys like Tim, myself, tons of other great content creators that definitely deserve your support. If you love this content, consider donating $1 or $2 here and there. Your support is graciously appreciated.
Yeah, if you consume somebody's content, see if they exist on Patreon and support them. I mean, I know a whole bunch of folks over on Patreon.
That's a great way that you can actually, enact change in its own regard too, is you're allowing people like us to be completely unbiased and completely just straight line to you.
Yeah, and the reality is that we're in a constant battle for our existence in social media. The day may come, and it's happening to some of the smaller gun channels right now, where they're just getting shut off, and we may get shut off on YouTube. So we're going to have to go somewhere else, and we don't have a way to make a living, because the promise that YouTube gave us 10 years ago when we got started suddenly doesn't apply to us anymore, because we're not serving their political agenda.
Yeah, maybe it's a reasonable.
It's just reasonable that we silence you guys, because you're talking about things that scare us. Yeah. So anyway,
guys, thanks for watching today's video. Tim, thank you. And guys, we'll see you next time.